Hey everyone, a few days ago Tim Cain, a very prominent developer, one of the creators of the original Fallout games, made a video titled "Do Devs Know What Gamers Want?" I said I'd make a video going through the subject and started whipping up a script. This then turned into 2 scripts, and then 3, and finally 4 as the week progressed, and I even took a break from this subject and talked about other stuff. Something about this video just broke my brain and frustrated me, partly because I said this video would be next. If I hadn't said anything, I would have just skipped this nonsense altogether, as it will 100% end up as more trouble than it's actually worth. Tim Cain's video's premise is that basically developers don't know what gamers want because gamers don't know what they want either. And as much as I tried 4 times to write a nice, clean little script going into this matter, all formal and polite and all that stuff, I hit my limit when that 4th script broke my brain again. So now I'm just mostly going to riff it, and I'm not going to care about the consistency of the video, nor am I going to care about whether I'm being an asshole, because yeah, I'm frustrated, it is what it is. I dove into this video, which then led me to another 4 or 5 different videos that he recommended people either watch or read the comments to see, like, as evidence of what he was talking about in his terrible, overcomplicated points. I don't even know where or how to start, but I don't even care. Let's just get this going so that I can be done with it and move on to something else. Disclaimer though, his video will be in the description if you want to see it for yourselves. I'm going to be cutting out a lot of the fat and just focusing on the questions and answers. So let's go.
Do devs know what gamers want? And here it is. No. No, we don't know what you want. We have no idea, seriously, what you want. Because I know some of you are like, it's stupid. You should know what we want. We don't. Here's the longer answer. And it's all kind of can be summed up as because you don't know either. Let me dive into that. This is a deep dive on why y'all don't even know what you want, which is why we don't know what to give you. First off, many of you only tell developers what you hate. Great. You said what it is you don't want, but what is it you want?
Okay, before I move on with the rest of this sentence, let me just set up a main theme for this video that we'll be returning to as we go along, which is this. They don't have to know what it is that we specifically want in order to give us a good game that will be thoroughly enjoyed by many people. This sentence comes across as if gamers telling them what it is that they hate is somehow useless, when it's actually incredibly useful feedback. You can get a lot from what people are raising their voices against. It shows you stuff to avoid, and when there's so many of us and such a large history of games already to draw from when it comes to stuff that we have raised our voices against over the years, that is a lot of information across several types of games. I also don't like the way that he said this either. It's almost as if all we do is hate on shit. It plays to that soy narrative that is so frequently used these days about gamers being so mean and so hateful, never enjoying anything. We all just want to watch the world burn and we're not real gamers, blah 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 blah. When in reality we do enjoy a lot of stuff and we praise it and we ask for it alongside rejecting what we don't enjoy. It's just that people, developers, directors, CEOs, whatever, don't like to listen to those examples because they don't suit their business models, their corporate demands, or their investors' goals. How many years did we spend in the last generation telling companies to stop pumping our games with predatory monetization? How many years spent calling out the instances where content was being cut out, either to be added later as DLC, often already packaged on disc, or to be set aside for pre-order bonuses? Did it matter? Well, of course it didn't. How many times do we have to beg developers right now during this generation's curse to please stop making their games so politically driven, to please stop being so politically correct, to please stop this attitude of games having to have social impact, to please cut loose and give us some fun games with some attitude again, or at the very least to stop sacrificing the quality of the content with nonsense. Does it matter? Well, of course it doesn't, because these particular issues, which are actually massive and have led to the downfall of many games in the past generation and in this current generation that chose to chase the elusive dreams of live services or the elusive dreams of ESG grants, resulting in what we saw last year. They paint a pretty clear picture that this industry isn't a dialogue between gamers and developers anymore. It's about pleasing investors and complying with demands. And the only places where this dialogue between between developer and gamers can still be seen sometimes is when it comes to indie games or lower budget games like AA games. Or I guess, now as well with Eastern developers coming into the scene and actually listening to what it is that people want, instead of trying to force something else. This is something of a fifth script on this matter, and I'm cutting the bullshit and just straight up saying that this narrative has gotten beyond tiresome, especially when it's based in a fantasy established by bias. Everyone is so quick to point at the bad, toxic gamers without realizing how insanely unlikely it is that a bunch of random people would actually unite to be toxic and avoid specific games for no goddamn reason. No one wants to admit that there's a rotting problem within the industry itself, and that this has reached a boiling point where it results in what they like to call a Gamergate event. But anyway, let's proceed.
I have an entire video on how to give good feedback, and I'll link it below. But I can just say, when you keep saying, I hate this in games, I hate this feature, I hate these kind of characters and all that, great! What kind of characters do you want? If you hate sarcastic characters, well, guess what? There's an entire realm of non-sarcastic characters. But what is it you want? Do you want funny characters? Do you want serious characters? Do you want characters with a lot of background? Do you characters that with very little, that you don't want to spend a time in a wall of text dialogue? What do you want?
And this is where you'll start seeing where some of my frustrations with this video and having to write these scripts come from. Tim Cain is... I mean, look at the guy. This is a dude who was already developing games when I was in diapers. He's an industry veteran. Some would even call him an industry legend because of some of the stuff that he made, especially Fallout. And yet, here he sits giving statements like these. I mean, how do I even tackle this? How do I explain, me, as just some guy, explaining to an industry veteran the concept of... and there's just so many different concepts too. I mean, the concept of good writing. The second, the stupid concept that gamers want varied characters. Nobody wants the same kind of character across the board. The concept of obvious character writing pitfalls one must avoid, like shoving in untimely lines of comedy when a moment is meant to be serious. Like, no shit, Tim. If I hate sarcastic characters, there's an entire realm of non-sarcastic characters? Golly G, who would have thought? What is it that you want? Do you want funny characters? Do you want serious characters? Do you want characters with a lot of background? Blah 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 blah. I mean, what is this? What the fuck am I listening to? Do I have to write a book specifying what kind of characters I want in a video game and how to execute them in order for game developers to be able to provide me with a game that has good characters? And also, please take note of this. Please don't forget Tim's desire for specificity. It's very important, and it's going to come up again during the video. How about you just give us well-written characters, dude? And oh yeah, of course, there's also another running theme in this video and others that he makes where he does this like joke thing where he's like, oh sure, I'll just go on the computer and I will slide the writing from bad to good. We'll get there in a second. He said it in this video as well. It's just that it's such a terrible argument. It's such a cop-out. Like, it just is what it is. If the average gamer has to give a developer a complete briefing on what types of characters that they want and how they want them, to the point of a developer having a full breakdown to be able to provide the player's ideal of good writing, then we may as well have the company replace them with us. Generally, people want something of quality. The type of thing or the style of it or whatever doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It only matters if you're working with a pre-established restriction. Like, for example, if you're doing a sequel, so let's say you're doing a sequel to Fallout, obviously you have to stick to the themes, game design, and aesthetics of Fallout. If you're making a new IP though, go nuts. Make whatever your mind can cook up, just make it quality, and it will find its own fanbase. This is yet another example where focusing on what gamers don't want is a good idea. Just focusing on the things that people usually report as mistakes or as problems or as things that they are sick of seeing, and doing the opposite already lands you at a pretty good spot. But of course, you also have to have your own knowledge. You have to know how to develop a game. If you're a designer, it helps being a good designer. If you're a writer, it helps being a good writer. And these are just these basic foundational things that, I mean, you can't just turn to us and expect us to tell you how to do your job. We can tell you what we would like I can tell you that I'd like more sci-fi games, for example, but don't go and ask me for a full character breakdown and a full plot breakdown. Anyway, moving on.
Even when you say what you want, you're often extraordinarily vague. You will say, I want a better game, I want better AI, I want a better UI. Yeah, I'll just slide the better slider from okay to great on all of those. I have an entire video on why developers need context to your feedback. If you don't say what you're talking about, it can be really vague. For example, what does better for you mean in a game? Or when you say, how is that AI bad? What are you talking about? Are they not taking cover? Are they just running straight at you shooting? What do you mean? When you say you don't like a UI, what is the friction point in that UI that you're encountering? What is it that's bothering you? If you just say that UI is dumb, it's not helping. And trust me, it's not just gamers who do this. I've worked with people who've literally said that out of their mouth. They're like, that looks dumb. Great, I'll get right on that.
See, there it is. Now we have to take game development courses to be able to explain to people who are fully formed game developers what it is that sucks in their games. There's nothing wrong with gamers being more specific and literate when it comes to voicing their feedback, be that for things that they don't want or for things that they do want. Clarity is great, but there's two important things to this too, which is number one, the average gamer should simply not be expected to pour a bunch of time and energy to writing these massive comments perfectly specifying what it is that they liked and disliked and the reasons why. And this is for different reasons too. Number one, it's unnecessary. Developers aren't stupid. They can see the major issues in their games just as easily as we can see them. The fact that nowadays the attitude in some of these studios has deteriorated so much into such a safe and stupid environment where, for example, over at Ubisoft, an exclamation mark or a lack of emojis on a message can get you a meeting in HR is not gamers' faults. Same goes with the reports from Concord's failure, talking about how there was this super positive environment where constructive criticism is considered hostile. Everyone should just shut up if they have nothing nice to say. Mistakes can't be pointed out because, well, they're negative. Like, it isn't our fault that this is how the culture has become in some studios, that developers do trashy work and cannot see it or acknowledge it, and they can't listen to when developers talk about it, let alone when gamers talk about it. If they can't acknowledge it, or if they can't express it internally, what does it matter if Jarvis Chervinsky drops a 20-page essay perfectly detailing every up in the video game? Another reason why this is unreasonable is the fact that developers don't care, or at the very least they sure don't give any feedback in regards to having received that feedback. I was actually one of these dumbasses who would spend hours on a keyboard writing detailed comments, almost like full-length written reviews in comment sections, detailing good stuff and bad stuff, and I never once got a reply or anything letting me know that my advice or notes were actually acknowledged. So naturally I stopped doing this, and yeah, why would any other people do it at all? Even when Twitter became this like central area where everyone could be found and interacted with so seemingly easily because we didn't have to add anybody as friends, we could just tweet at them or reply under them, it was still a pointless endeavor and beyond annoying because of the text character limits. But anyway, back to the main thing. So all of this was number one. Number two is developers should know that their AI is bad from minimal information. Like, again, for example, in his other video, he uses enemy AI as an example. He says someone saying that the AI is dumb is useless because he cannot click a little box that says smart enemies. And then he says like, if someone says these enemies never take cover, there's cover that I use but they never take it. Oh, so you want enemies to take cover more frequently. Okay, that's constructive, I can work with that. And this is just such a terrible example for Tim to give. If someone tells you that your AI is dumb, or that your AI is bad, it's impossible that, depending on the genre that the game is in, the developer won't know what they mean. If it's a shooter and the enemies aren't taking cover and are just running at you, like hell yes, of course that's the problem. What else would it be? Like, that's actually one of those problems where it should be noticed and fixed during QA testing. And if it's a game with, melee combat, like for example the Batman Arkham games, then usually the issue would no longer have anything to do with taking cover, it would have to do with, for example, maybe enemies taking turns attacking you. Maybe enemies should attack the player at the same time instead of waiting for the player to be done getting attacked or to be done attacking someone. And speaking again of the Batman games, if it's the stealth sections, maybe if someone says your AI is dumb or bad, maybe it has something to do with your enemies not checking out things that they should check out, or checking out things that they shouldn't check out, which is something that these games covered very well. If there were several of other another of their guards taken down, they would start pairing up and checking things out together. And in some other instances, they wouldn't check anything out at all, because they would know already that it's Batman drawing them to a distraction. Developers aren't idiots. In many cases, they are gamers, just like everyone else. I say in many cases because nowadays you never know. But back in the golden days, oh yeah, they were gamers, just like everyone else. So they can infer what it is that their game is missing. They don't need an essay explaining it to them.
Some UI issues are really an underlying system mechanic issue. You can have a really good UI if your game supports encumbrance, but you take encumbrance out and suddenly that same UI is terrible because people can carry more. And suddenly there's a lot more things in their inventory, and the UI you were using for a limited inventory doesn't work for a UI with an unlimited inventory. So that's why you need to be very specific about what it is you didn't like. Do you really hate that UI? Or do you hate that you can vacuum up everything and Or do you want to be able to vacuum up everything, but you just wish the game would somehow organize it better? Be specific.
This here is another similar case of this stuff where, while I can understand that developers cannot think of everything while making a game with deeper systems, where sometimes problems only manifest themselves when players get their hands on the games and pour dozens and dozens and dozens, if not more, hours into them, and start finding issues that come with frequency or issues that come with, for example, he mentions vacuuming up everything in an inventory. I'm not going to be unreasonable and say that the developers have to know everything right off the get-go. Of course they don't, but nobody can come in here and tell me that gamers don't actually speak out against these issues and detail them precisely, because they absolutely do. Sometimes, again, developers just don't listen. Think, for example, Helldivers last year. Gamers spent months telling them, hey, stop nerfing everything, you're up the game's fun, but they just didn't listen. For months they did not listen. But anyway, regardless, his next argument is going to be picking up from something along these lines, and it's about to be really bad. So yeah, here we go.
Here's the one that really gets me, and that many of you refuse to acknowledge. You all do not agree on what a good feature is. Go back and watch both of my encumbrance videos. They're linked below. Or watch the video I had on fast travel, or even the video I did on providing game difficulty. Read the comments on it, which I know a lot of you don't do, and you complain that YouTube doesn't do a good job of sorting them. Just pick one of those videos, set it to show all the comments, and scroll for a few minutes. You will find that some of you literally say you will not play a game that is lacking a particular feature, and then keep scrolling, and you'll find people who hate games that have that feature. And it can be anything: fast travel, VO, walls of text, story mode. And you have reasons for doing it. I'm not saying you're wrong. What I am saying is there is no possible way to make a game that will make all of you happy.
So let me get this straight. Tim Cain speaking here for the game developer fuck. Oh my god. Please like and subscribe so that I can afford some ibuprofen or Tylenol or some shit. Tim Cain, right here, speaking for the game developer delegation, wants us to be specific in the things that we want and don't want, and wants us to be specific about what it is in regards to those things that we like or dislike, or find problems with. But then he complains when the mind-blowingly obvious outcome of that is that we are going to have different opinions based off of different tastes, different pet peeves, different things that we find engaging, different styles of things that we find alluring, etc. And then of course the exact same thing but in reverse, so things that we hate, things that we find boring, things that we find unappealing, etc. Like, well, what the f*** am I even supposed to do with this? I, Daz of House Baratheon, first of my name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, by word of the Intergalactic Gamer Delegation, apologize for the millions of our kind not possessing a single brain cell that works in unison. Come on, man, be specific, but wait, don't be too specific, otherwise you'll have different opinions and then we won't know what the fuck to do and it's your fault. Like, do you see what I mean? And the thing is, this is the last thing that I wanted. I didn't want to be a jerk in this video. I mean, Jesus Christ, is one of the creators of Fallout, a franchise that, despite its ups and downs, despite the fact that it's probably never even going to be good again because Bethesda is taking a deep dive into bankruptcy via mediocrity, which, by the way, we have been more than precise in complaining about. Like, how many times did we have to call it out? Absolutely, the fanbase is split. Absolutely, there's a lot of animosity within. Some motherfuckers are like, New Vegas is the GOAT. If you don't agree, you're a lobotomite. And some motherfuckers are like, Fallout 3 was way better than New Vegas, and if you don't agree, then you are an uncultured dumb fuck. But if there's something we can definitely agree on, is that Fallout 4 was the weakest single-player instance of this franchise. And I say that as someone who's got like 2,000 hours on it. This isn't a game that I hate, but it's more than established that this is what the majority thinks, and that we crave a return to something at least akin to those two, to Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. And instead, what do we got? Well, we got Fallout 76, an online game that isn't even a Fallout game. Then we got Starfield, where we noticed that all of our complaints about the writing in Fallout 4 have gone completely unnoticed. In fact, worse than unnoticed, because the writing was worse in Starfield. In fact, everything was worse in Starfield. The very core of what makes a Bethesda game fun, that lure of adventure, that immersion and connection to the world that we are exploring and questing through, was gone. And then we got the Fallout show, where Bethesda showed us that to them, what makes a Fallout thing be Fallout is the 50s aesthetic and the ha 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 goofy humor ha 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 ha. Ensuring then that for Fallout 5 what we can expect is a game from a studio that refuses to listen to the fans, has completely forgotten the identity of the franchise they craved so much for themselves that they went as far as to pull shady to obtain it, and somehow regressed the quality of their game design over the last 10 years, despite it already being incredibly simple to begin with. Anyway, I digress. A franchise that, despite all of this, I still cannot stop loving, and a lot of that is owed to this man right here. But at the same time, what am I supposed to do with this? With these arguments, with these comments, with these answers?
You will find that some of you literally say you will not play a game that is lacking a particular feature, and then keep scrolling and you'll find people who hate games that have that feature.
Of course this is going to happen, Tim. You're making super broad, almost philosophical-like videos on game design elements. Obviously you're going to find people who like something and then people who dislike the very same thing. How is this surprising to a man who launched several games already? Shouldn't he already know that not everyone likes the same thing, and that's not to mention how these people talk about different games, which is another duh moment. Because of course some features are going to be beloved in some genres and detestable in other genres, which will come up again later in this video, but just as a quick example, limited inventory sorting works great in something like Resident Evil, but if you put it into a RPG like Witcher, it's abysmal. And various features that work in a Souls-like would be a hassle in a random open-world action-adventure game.
There is no possible way to make a game that will make all of you happy.
Of course there isn't. This is obvious. This is why I struggled so much with every script. How do I even respond to something that is like saying 1 + 1 = 2? It has never been asked of developers to make a game that makes everyone happy. In fact, this is what people now mostly advocate against. We don't want developers to sit around with a bunch of other morons and consultants trying to figure out how to appeal to everyone. We want developers to appeal to their fan bases. If you're working on a game that's next in line in a long-running franchise, stick to that franchise's roots, or stick to the most popular game of that franchise. And if there's a split, like for example how there is in Fallout situation that we just touched on, find a way to consolidate. Take the best parts of each of those games and try to make it work together. For example, Obsidian's New Vegas is praised for its writing, so for the love of God, if a developer doesn't know what good writing means, hire a developer that does. And Bethesda's Fallout 3 and even Fallout 4 to some extent are praised for their presentation and how their world design flows. So you grab these two ingredients and you just try to make them work together. But anyway, that's just a random example, because usually I would say that you don't have such a big split as is noticed in the Fallout community. And if you're doing a new IP in a certain genre, learn from the successes of the most liked games in that genre, and of course learn from the failures of the most disliked games in that genre. Appealing to everyone was never even a question, let alone a requirement.
What's interesting to me, and this channel has made me really acknowledge it, you don't even agree on the fact that all of you are disagreeing. Some of you don't acknowledge there are any other game players out there.
Again, Tim is asking us to be specific about us. Why are we supposed to acknowledge other people? Why would we do that? People are going to tell you what they like and dislike. They're not going to bother with the rest, especially when they're being asked to be specific. Do you see the issue with specificity here? Where it just muddles the waters. This weird obsession with, please tell us what you like, please tell us what to do and how to do it. It's such a weird and unnatural way to go at things. You can get so much from what people hate and from what people genuinely like. For example, when I think of enemy AI, there's always a game that comes to mind as something that was often praised and that is still compared to today, which is Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain. There's always so much to draw from in this industry. This feels so absurdly out of touch with both the reality of the industry, but also what I would assume is the reality of game development. Because holy f***, I mean, you could say that gamers don't know what they want in a completely different context and actually nail it right in the head and find a perfect avenue for game development. But not like this. The way that sentence would work is in the fact that we like to be surprised and there's ideas out there that we can't even think of or piece together ourselves that would actually make up for a great game. We're just the customer here, not the creatives. Make a good ass game for us. Go nuts, be creative. Nobody ever told Tim how to make Fallout. I can guarantee that. Like, I can guarantee that they weren't waiting for the intergalactic gamer delegation to speak up and be like, okay boys, here's what we want and exactly how we want it, and then voila, Fallout was conceived. Like, games aren't supposed to be made by commission.
There was a video I did where I said people frequently want better graphics, but a lot of you ask for better graphics, and someone said, and I quote, "No one asked for better graphics." I guess you never read a review and you don't go on any forum boards, because yes, they do. And keep in mind, better graphics, sometimes they're just talking about they want a higher resolution. They bought a 4K monitor and they're upset they're not getting a game in 4K. Sometimes they want a farther view distance. They're upset that it clips really early. Sometimes they just mean more creature variety or more location variety. These are all better graphics. These are all things that require a lot more art time, a lot more things to be loaded in, a lot better optimization of your engine. These are all going into the category of better graphics, and all of you, I guarantee, have asked for some form of better graphics at some point when you're responding to a question of what did you like and dislike about this game. Many of you say, well, I don't really care about graphics. I'm one of you. Graphics have never been high on my list of what I care about in a game, but many, many, many players are attracted to a game by its pretty graphics, even if they stay afterwards because the gameplay is so good.
The topic of graphics is one that is just a whole other thing deserving of its own video. In many ways, Tim is right here. People do want better graphics, and better graphics do attract a lot of eyes towards the game. But the thing is that as graphics have gotten better, we ended up losing a lot in return. We lost attention to detail, and in some games we also lost mechanical depth. This is a trade-off that people did not want, and it is the main reason why that comment even exists. Like, nobody asked for better graphics. Some people say that because, yeah, when put in context with the shit that people lost, yeah, nobody asked for better graphics if it's supposed to come at the cost of everything else. And so this is kind of where developers have to ask themselves, who are they going to appeal to? What is the smartest thing for them to do? Which risk are they going to take? Are they going to take the risk of blowing their budget, time, and resources on visuals, sacrificing gameplay, or vice versa? Depending on what game someone is making, this can have an abysmal reception. For example, try and make a Fallout game, blow the budget up on visuals, and up the attention to detail and the RPG depth, and you will be eaten alive by the Fallout community. Some talented studios or studios with a lot of money are able to bring both elements together, but yeah, it isn't easy. So it's one of those things where it's up to the developers to calculate their risks and make their choices. What I can tell you that gamers don't like is to see those overinflated budgets popping up for games that simply don't look like they should have cost that much money to make. And then worse than that, starting that bullshit narrative that because of how expensive games are to make, they need to increase their prices yet again. Gamers don't like to see bullshit excuses being brought to the table and often being pinned on us. Take for example Spider-Man 2. That game cost around $315 million to make. Now, personally, I don't give a who they get to try and convince me. It could even be the Pope for all I care. I'm not going to be convinced that that game needed $315 million to be made. This is just another case of absurdity in the industry where absolute morons who haven't got a clue of what they're doing are put in leading positions and make stupid decisions. That game was so expensive that despite selling well, it ended up barely making a profit, which hurt the company. And now it's like, well, what now? What's next for Insomniac? What happened to the budget? Are we going to be told what cost so much to inflate that number? We know some things, like for example, some promotional material for this game was absolutely retarded, like pardon my French, but it is what it is. They had like trucks hanging off of buildings and monuments, and it's just, what the fuck, what are you doing? What are you fucking stupid? I'm supposed to pay for this shit? It's Spider-Man 2, it's a PlayStation exclusive. What is all this nonsense for? It's going to sell, so just shut up and give me my sequel and stop spending money like a moron who thinks that the games industry is Hollywood or some shit. Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked. At the end of the day, it's just one of those things where developers have to pick one or the other or try for a middle ground where they can still make a game that looks good, but that doesn't necessarily go into the craziness of photorealism and ray tracing, etc. Elden Ring is a great example of this. Even Skyrim, with just a couple of basic lighting and weather mods, can look gorgeous even now in 2025. I'll put some screenshots sliding through the screen right now.
Many of you argue against things that would make a game that even tries to provide more things for more players. And I've talked about how design by committee is bad, which I agree with. What I mean by that is many of you literally have argued that games should have fewer game options. I'm not even talking about game difficulty, just fewer game options. I have a video on game options, I'll link it below. Again, read those comments. Many of you are going, yeah, I hate when games have a lot of options. I don't know what to set. The designer should have decided that. Why are they making me do that? That just means they didn't have a strong vision. Not ignoring for the fact that many of those options are there to let more people play the game. I'm colorblind. That's a disability. There are games I literally cannot play because they have puzzles or information that I'm supposed to pick up on that's color-based, but there are no color blindness options.
This whole section is a mess because first it says options and it's like, okay, what options? Then it goes into design by committee being bad, creating bland games, which is like, yep, true. So what are we talking about? Easy and remarkable games? And then it's like, it's not even difficulty, it's just fewer game options because gamers hate when a game has too many options that they don't want to decide on, as it is a sign of a weak vision. And then it verts out into accessibility options. What are you talking about, Tim? Let's do one at a time, I guess. You can't make the argument that there's a lot of gamers against accessibility options. Generally, if you're not screwing up a game with something like this, most people will not care that it's there as an option. The difference comes more so when dealing with games that have this very specific vision and theme. For example, Souls-like games are known for being challenging, bleak, and somewhat obscure, which obviously doesn't remain that way for a long time when such a huge community starts uncovering all of its secrets and putting them on the internet, but anyway, they have this reputation and this style, and this is what makes these games special, and so they garner a like-minded community. They may have their differences in some things, you know, a classic one is whether or not Dark Souls 2 is a good game, but overall everyone is on the same page. If you introduce options that water down this key element of the game, you fundamentally change the experience of the game. This isn't like an Assassin's Creed game or Horizon Zero this or a Red Dead that or The Last of These or anything like that, where the main experience is the story or the journey or just having some blind fun in a sandbox. If you fundamentally change the experience of the game, even if it's optional and people can skip those things, you completely destroy the core of that product. The Souls community became the Souls community because there was no additional optional setting to skip a boss or make the game easier. If there had been, this community wouldn't exist now, because instead of slamming our heads against a figurative wall for like 3 hours trying the same same boss over and over and over until we finally got it, or until we looked for a better way to beat it within the confines of what the game offers us, we would have just gone into the settings and made the fight easier, completely eliminating those unique elements that make the experience, well, unique. There's something special to what makes these games and its community so vibrant, and it's just not worth it to risk and ruin that by opening the gates to a new kind of following that has absolutely no clue what these games are about, that can't share in the same experience that everyone else is having. It would split the community down the middle and open the door to more future changes to appeal to this new side of the community, watering down those older elements of the games in a desperate quest to try and compromise both of these communities without realizing that they are actually destroying the entire thing. And for what? Not every game is for us, not every game is for everyone. That's not an unreasonable position. Look at all the games out there that are so particular. I recently tried the demo for Dynasty Warriors Origins. I really wanted to enjoy it and get into it, but I was overwhelmed with so much shit on the screen that it turned me off. It's on my bucket list for now, for another day to try it out. When that day comes, when I want the Dynasty Warriors experience, I will return to it, learn it, and if I still don't get it, maybe check a YouTube starter's guide or whatever, and then I'm going to play it. What I will not do is start bitch, moaning and complaining that I want more standardized game design to appeal to me personally. And it's the same thing with Dark Souls. People say that this is gatekeeping and that gatekeeping is bad. Call it whatever you want to call it. I don't see it that way. It's just a thing among many other things. If you want to jump in, try it and enjoy it, the Dark Souls community will welcome you with open arms. It's not going to gatekeep itself from you. It's going to welcome you with open arms as it welcomed me back in 2015 or 16 or so when I played Bloodborne and clicked with it. No shortage of people online offering tips. Someone even told me to use the music box for the fight against Father Gascoigne. No shortage of friendly channels teaching people techniques to try against bosses. This is how you do it. You don't barge in and start demanding changes to the core experience just because you can't identify with it. These are the instances where you may find strong opposition to additional options in terms of difficulty or accessibility that could impact the game's essence. But stuff designed for people with visual impairments or other problems along those lines? Of course not. Much less in other video games. This is not a general issue at all. And it's kinda nasty to be listening to this. Like, what kind of narrative is this? Gamers don't want people who have issues to be able to play video games? We're gatekeeping people with actual physical or mental issues that are unable to play video games from playing video games? Like, no options! There are going to be no more options left in video games, people. As your new president, I went on the Joe Rogan podcast. Biggest podcast in the world, some say. And I tell him, Joe, you don't understand. Colorblind people are a plague in this country. When I'm president, I am going to usher in a new age where colorblind people cannot play video games anymore. We're gonna take away all of the accessibility options. Protanopia, Deuteranopia, and Tritanopia. Those are the worst ones. Tritanopians, those guys. We gotta get them south of the border. It's a weakness, Joe. It's a weakness. I'm telling you, it's a weakness. These people, they're making game developers weak. It's too many options. Too many options. Some people, they come up to me, they say, Mr. President, what are you gonna do about gaming, Mr. President? So this is what I'm gonna do, Joe. We're gonna bring back jiggle physics. We're gonna bring back manly protagonists, and we're gonna keep out all the colorblind people. And as for difficulty options, I didn't even know there was so much discussion around it, so I went to check out Tim's video on the matter to read comments like he suggested, and there were like 200 of them, so I skimmed through the ones at the top, and yeah, I didn't really find that much opposition or any real problem. I did find some strange ones, like I saw this one guy who claims that he's been burned countless times in RPGs because he picks a difficulty option and then 10 hours in it becomes too easy or too hard because of bad balance issues, and it's like, how about you just switch the difficulty in the menu, my brother? This issue falls on game design, by the way, not in a matter of options. Then some other guy was mad because he sees easy, normal or hard, and if they're not explained, then he gets mad. And it's, again, just pick the normal one. He'd like games to say, this is the intended difficulty, which by the way, a lot of games are doing that now. So yeah, but even without it, is it that hard to infer that the normal difficulty will almost always be the one that the devs think that players should go for? It's literally in the name itself. It's not supposed to be easier than normal, it's not supposed to be harder than normal, it's supposed to be normal. And if you don't like it, most games allow you to change the difficulty in the middle of the game. Someone else talked about how they believe that open world games should be designed with no quest markers and no fast travel, which is in direct opposition to comments wanting these things, and in cases like these, you kinda just have to see what suits your video game. If your map is too big, put it in. Chances are that you'll have a significant amount of players that are tired of running around. If your game is caked with side content and stuff that prompts you to move around a lot, put it in. Chances are you'll have a significant amount of players not interested in running around back and forth from city hubs to whatever locations the quests are located at, and that they've already been to several times before. This was one of my issues with Dragon's Dogma 2. Or find a middle ground where you encourage on-foot traveling while also providing the means for fast travel, but maybe at some kind of cost. Whatever you do though, don't do what Dragon's Dogma 2 did by making this cost come through microtransactions. No one is going to like this. Make it a realistic cost through in-game currency or resources and encourage on-foot traveling with rewards. Bethesda games do this excellently. I almost never use fast travel unless I need to go to the other side of the map. They're very well designed in that, well, actually, let me rephrase that. Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 are very well designed in that you're always at a walking distance of an intriguing location featuring some enemies, maybe some good loot and some resources. Whether it be a cave or a ruin or an enemy encampment or a metro station, there's always something. And to add to that, there's also random events triggering along the way. Something that I dearly missed in Dragon's Dogma 2 was something like this being more common, because 9 times out of 10, whenever I went somewhere, which was usually somewhere that I've already been to before, I was always running into the same enemy groups in the exact same locations. Anyway, unless you have a game where there's a very specific element tied to survival or whatever, where the main player experience is tied to the struggle of the moment-to-moment gameplay, then I would say that you're safe to add fast travel functions, and then people can choose whether or not to use them, without heavily impacting the experience the same way that an easy difficulty option would do to a Souls game. This video is already running so long, and I have literally said nothing that shouldn't be obvious to a veteran game developer, and this is why this script has bothered me so much. It's like, why am I even making this?
I get that you, the individual, want what you, the individual, want. But you have to realize that you, the individual, are not very good at giving developers feedback, and that you, the individual, are not everybody the game's being made for. Many of you aren't even in the majority, and I hear you. I don't think I'm in the majority. I like a lot of niche games. I've made a lot of niche games.
We understand this perfectly. It looks more like Tim Cain doesn't, even though he's saying it himself, because if he acknowledges that there's a majority and a minority when it comes to these options, then he already answered his own question. Follow what the majority is saying and he will know what at least the majority of the players want. And nobody said everyone must be catered to. Again, that's impossible.
And so that's kind of what I'm saying here, is game development is hard on its own, technically. But this lack of consensus among game players about what they want takes that difficulty to a whole new level. It's that much harder to make a game that you want to be popular, that you want to have a lot of sales, because most of you don't know what you want. Those of you that do know what you want are very vague at expressing it. And many of you don't realize that what you want isn't what a lot of other people want. This is why, for most of my career, I just made what I wanted, what I liked. I hoped other people would like it. We weren't sure. We didn't care. And when marketing would ask us questions like, what's the demographic for your game? We didn't know. Many of you like my earlier games. Maybe it's because I did make them in a vacuum like that and I wasn't thinking what people thought. However, I can tell you my later games sold more copies. So what's the right path? I don't know. But I can tell you this. Do game developers know what game players want? No, we don't.
Well, tough shit, Mr. Cain. it is what it is. You know, during the pandemic, my brother took over this sort of like cafe, snack bar, and restaurant business, which then was also where my dad and myself ended up working. Really bad time to get into this kind of industry, I know, but he was a trained chef after spending years up in England, so we gave it a shot when things were opening back up. There was always people to eat there because it was near a place with a lot of essential workers that needed to eat. And he always wanted to make these perfect burgers, so he'd experiment with all sort of shit. He'd make his own patties and try all sorts of seasoning combinations, different types of salad, different types of cheese. He'd try to add different meat to some of them. He like grilled chicken strips or smoked brisket on top of different patties. He'd try different sauces, combine them, and at some point even make his own sauces. It was a good time because I got to taste test all of it, but no matter what he did, he'd always have some customer who didn't like them because it was too spicy, or they didn't like barbecue sauce, or they didn't like the taste of the smoked meat, or sometimes some would even complain that the burger was too big and heavy on their stomach. So just a myriad of different feedback every time that he made a new burger and asked for opinions. At the end of the day, he ended up with just 3 or 4 different burgers on the menu from the dozens of combinations that he tried. It is what it is. We couldn't expect the customers to tell us specifically which ingredient was making it too spicy or too strong for them. Sometimes we'd even get weird comments like, "Ah man, the mustard taste just doesn't sit right with me on this one," on burgers that did not have mustard. As the chef, it was up to him to do 2 things. First, it was up to him to come up with delicious burger recipes. He couldn't expect the customers to come up to him and be like, "Hey, here's a list of ingredients of what I love and want on my burger. Here's how you should cook the meat. Also, here's the spice combination that you should use on the patties. And here's 2 lists of ingredients, one for the marinade and one for the sauce." Like, all of this was up to him as the chef, just as it was up to any developer to have already figured out how to do better game design, better writing, better design, etc. Or at least knowing who to hire for those positions. Much like I know that my brother didn't have a taste slider to flip over from bad to good, I know that developers don't have a good AI slider or a good writing slider. But as trained professionals in their areas with experience, this is up to them to know how to do. After all, it's their jobs. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to say. If you can't do the bare minimum requirements of your job, then what the hell are you doing? And the other thing that was up to him as a chef and the owner of the business was to see what to drop out of the menu based on what he assessed from customer feedback and sales. Some things were clearly not working out, so he got rid of them. And then there were things over time that he didn't even like, but that he had to do because of an outside demand, which were fish-based dishes. Oh, he fucking hated to cook fish dishes, and honestly so do I, but every now and then he had to give into that demand and put some fish dishes on the menu, as well as traditional Portuguese food, which he was also not a fan of cooking, but that a lot of older working men in the place nearby totally went for. Game developers have the same circumstances. There's loads of information that they can get from the market, and honestly, the least specific the better, apparently, because if we get too specific, then the problem is that we have too many things, too many particularities, too many things that we like and dislike, or that we like a certain specific way that differ from loads of other people's opinions, which then lead developers into being stumped and not knowing what to do. So why overcomplicate it? Just look at what people hate with a burning passion and avoid it completely, and you're already on the right path. Then, depending on what kind of game you're making, you can get more specific into the feedback. So for example, if you're making a Souls-like game, then go sniff out some Souls-like communities. Go see the games that these communities praise and why, and also go see the games that these communities hate and why. It doesn't matter if it's too broad an example, just take it. And if you're looking for specificity, then go on YouTube, find a popular YouTuber that does detailed game reviews or analysis, or just look at random YouTube video analyses that are detailed, which you can usually perceive by the length of the video. Check how many views it has, check the positive like and dislike ratio, and if you find something that looks like people are resonating with, then dive in. Check out the video, read some comments, and you will assuredly find more than enough information that you need. And what you should stay away from are quick 5-10 minute reviews from games media. Forget about those and go have a look at what the people people who are actually playing your games and those who resonate with their takes are saying. What you cannot expect, however, is individual gamers having to be super detailed and analytical whenever giving feedback on a game in a comment section or whatever. This is unreasonable. Most people just want to play a video game and have a good time, and if they're going to give feedback, it's going to obviously not go into the nitty-gritty of it all. I really dislike this narrative that gamers don't know what they want or are incapable of providing enough feedback in order for developers to know what to give us. No offense intended at all, but that's such an incredibly unrealistic and out of touch, bordering on stupid thing to say, as is the total dismissal of the amount of information that can be gained by just what people say that they don't like. Just look at what's going on right now. Look at the amount of friction between gamers, the market, and the actual studios, publishers, and even some developers who commit their entire work to actually go against what the market is demanding. People like Matt Hansen being a perfect example of this. The market is screaming in agony. Please stop the ideologically charged bullshit. Please just give us worlds that suck us in. They don't even have to be that good. But do they listen? Of course they don't. Their personal agendas and their studio's diversity quotas are what's more important, so basically the content. Either get used to it or don't buy it. I mean, hell, in Matt Hansen's case and many others who crawl out of the woodwork to say that they either hate gamers or want to punch them in the face, like the community manager at Compulsion Games, the prick over at CD Projekt Red, David Gator, who called us tourists, defending the utter violation of the franchise he worked hard on for years for nothing. Some other guy too from the developers working at Perfect Dark, you know, like basically to these people it isn't even get used to it or don't buy it, it's you. I don't even want you to buy it. This game is not for you. Then the games fail, the studios get in trouble, and these people come out alongside the games news media blaming the gamers and making shit up about hate campaigns, just as it happened last month with this article glazing Corinne Bush, the incredible visionary behind the studio killing joke that was Dragon Age Veilguard. This is the attitude that dominates the AAA market. Even in cases where we don't see these overt moron activists attacking their fan bases, we see a vibe shift in how the studios act towards their player bases from how they used to act in the last generation. Sony is a great example of this. You can look at Spider-Man 1 and God of War 2018 and the pro-player energy that both of those games' marketing exuded, where they had their directors be very loose, friendly, and connected with their audiences. In fact, they were key instruments in the marketing of their games because their excitement and their humility was very palpable. Both of these guys and this energy, this palpable pro-player vibe, were completely gone for the sequels of both of these games. To sell Spider-Man 2, we didn't need trucks hanging off of buildings. We just needed Brian Intahar's excitement for a Spider-Man as a character and for the game that he was leading. Seeing that was fantastic for us. Like, I don't know how to explain it any better than them identifying with us and vice versa. The genuineness of his excitement and of his words when talking about the huge weight of the responsibility to make this game happen made me trust him. All of this is long gone when it comes to the AAA industry. Now what we see more of is these companies trying to stick it to us and demonizing us because they took fucking money from companies with agendas to push, and we are standing in the way of that because we are over here, you know, complaining, criticizing, giving feedback, or outright not buying these games, essentially being a thorn at their side. So now it's this disgusting relationship where they just want us to shut the up and consume the progressive, diverse, and inclusive product in the name of social impact or whatever the fuck, while waiting for the next product, in which they will dial the garbage that the last product had to 11, making it even more obnoxiously bad and difficult to ignore or tolerate. Even when a game looks great, depending on what company it is from, we just can't be certain that there isn't any more garbage hiding underneath the surface. The same kind of garbage that has been laying waste to game after game after game, and over on the Hollywood side, movie after movie after movie and show after show after show, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm sorry, but we've always been very vocal about this stuff, to the point where now it has become a problem, and we've always flocked to channels that actually go out of their way to do full reviews and full analysis of what exactly is so bad about a game, so that we don't have to, but that we resonated with. The problem is that developers are not always up to listen. Or sometimes they may be up to listening, but their higher-ups, the people above them, the people over at the publishing side, the publishers, the CEOs, the board of directors, etc., those people aren't up for listening. But anyway, that's all I got on this one. I'm so glad to put this one behind me finally. Sorry in advance if editing is boring on this one with mostly just gameplay stuff. I still hate that I had to make this video. I'm out of here. Please give me a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe so I can buy another batch of fucking antibiotics. I think I'm gonna need antibiotics for this one. Thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.